Okay, folks, all of this is strictly notes. Now, in this packet, it says factor out the GCF. Now, here's what GCF stands for. Greatest common factor. On this assignment, we're just going to figure out what the GCF is, okay, out of the two terms. You have two terms. You write GCF equals. So, the first thing you do before you worry about anything else is you have to ask yourself, do these both have x? Yeah, the 12 has x to the second and the 6 has x. So they both have x of some kind. Okay, it doesn't matter what power it is to, but they both have x of some kind. So, since they both have x of some kind, sorry, I'm trying to get a website up. So they both have x of some kind. You need to make sure both your x's have powers, at least starting here. So you got x second and x to the first. I know this sounds kind of weird because it says greatest common factor, but you actually take the x with the smallest exponent. So the smallest exponent's x to the first. Now you look at the numbers in front of the x's. You have 12 and 6. Those are called your coefficients. You go into that GCF calculator that is up here on your computer, and you just punch in 12, comma 6. You got to get the comma or it won't work. Hit enter, and the GCF 6. So it's 6x to the first power. Okay, that's all we're doing here. Okay, GCF on the next one. Do both of these have some kind of x on them? Yes, they do. Okay, x to the fifth and x to the first. You take, out of the x's, you take the smallest. Okay, x to the first. And you'll see why that is once we do something with it. Just take my word for it for now. So 12, 8. 12, comma 8, the GCF's 4. Okay, so 4x to the first. Okay, now on the next one, the GCF, you have two terms. Do they have x of some type? Yep, x third and x to the first. So again, we take the smaller x to the first, and then we go 15, comma 20. Okay, 15 and 20, the GCF's 5. By the way, out of the numbers, you're finding the greatest number you can divide by and not get a decimal. Okay, next one, GCF, greatest common factor. You got x to the first and x to the second and x to the first. So there are x's in both places. So x to the 1, okay, and then 64 and 16. So 64, comma 16, and that gives me the GCF 16. So 16x to the first. Okay, let's move along here. Okay, I've got another thing I'm forgetting about because it didn't really happen on the first page. It's not going to happen here either. Okay, one thing you have to decide, sometimes your GCF can be negative. If this first number here, the 3, if that would be negative, our GCF would be negative. But it's not, so the GCF's not negative, it's positive. Okay, 3x to the fourth, 3x to the first. So we have x to the first. Okay, and then 3 and 16. So 3, comma 16. Okay, the GCF's 1. So 1x to the first is the GCF. That means the only number you can divide 3 and 16 by, the only integer number, whole number you can divide 3 and 16 by and not get a decimal is 1. Okay, my next problem. Again, x's, I have x to the second and x to the first. Okay, so we're going to take the x to the first, and then don't use your GCF calculator if they're both the same number. Okay, your GCF is that number, so 5, x to the first. Because if I go 5, comma 5, the calculator doesn't take it. Okay, it just says GCF equals. Well, that means then 5, the actual number 5 is a GCF. Okay, GCF here, you got x to the second and x to the first. So again, we take x with the smaller power And then again, the numbers are exactly the same, 10 and 10. So 10 is the GCF. Okay, GCF. You've got x to the second and x to the first. So x to the first is the greatest, or is, I should say, is the x term. And then we got 20 and 20. Again, they're the exact same numbers, so 20 is that number. Okay, now on the next page, this is the last page in this packet, GCF. Now one thing, if the very first number, it's got to be the very first number. If that's negative, then our GCF has to be negative, okay? And that's if the very first number is negative. I don't care about that one. I care about the front one. If the very front one's negative, GCF's negative. And we got x to the second and x to the first, so x to the first. So I type those numbers in, 4 and 20. So 4, 20. Hit equals, and I got 4. So I put a 4 after the negative. So negative 4x to the first is a GCF. GCF here, first off, you have a negative in front, okay? So the GCF's negative, and that is always a rule, okay? If the very first number is negative, our GCF's got to be negative. Then I have x to the second and x to the first. So x to the first is the GCF. And then 6 and 21. Again, what we're figuring out when we do the GCF with 6 and 21, the biggest number we can divide by and not get a decimal. So the GCF's 3. So negative 3x to the power of 1. Okay, now on the next one, GCF, again, we have a negative in the front. So negative. We have x second and x to the first. So x to the first, we take the x of the smaller power. And then 3 and 6. So 3, 6. And you get 3. So negative 3x to the first. Okay, next one, GCF. You have negative in front, sure. And you have two terms that both contain x of some kind. You have x second, and that would be x to the first. So x to the first is the GCF. Then 20 and 30. So 20, 30. I get 10. Okay. Now in the other video, we're going to find out what you actually do with the GCF.